When a sudden winter storm strands Richard at the isolated rural home of a girl from university, he has no choice but to accept her help. His clothes are soaked, the power is out, and the roads are disappearing under snow. Unfortunately for Richard, Emily has no men's clothing to offer him. What begins as an awkward necessity slowly turns into something softer, stranger, and more intimate. Chapter 1. The snow hadn't been in the forecast. When Richard left campus at dawn, the sky had been clear, pale blue, and deceptively warm for December. The sun had poured over the parking lot in golden sheets, and he'd actually rolled his window down for the first 10 minutes of the drive. 5 hours to his parents' house. He'd done it dozens of times. His old sedan rattled a little when accelerating, the heater taking its time to warm up like always. But it ran. It always ran. He'd driven worse roads in worse conditions during early morning cycling meets. He trusted himself behind a wheel, probably too much. 2 hours into the drive, the sky changed. Not gradually, not politely, almost violently. Clouds rolled in like something summoned. Thick, fast-moving, swallowing the blue in minutes. The light shifted from warm gold to dull silver. The temperature dropped so sharply that he actually noticed it through the windshield. Then came the first flurry. "Seriously," he muttered, glancing at the dashboard clock. The flakes thickened faster than made sense. Within 10 minutes, visibility had shrunk to a gray blur. Cars ahead of him slowed. Brake lights glowed red through the white haze like distant warnings. His wipers struggled. The road turned slick. His steering wheel gave a subtle, terrifying twitch as his tires skimmed across forming slush. His car was old. His tires older. He tightened his grip. It's fine," he said aloud, though no one was there to hear it. The snow thickened. Then the wind came with it. Now the car was fighting him. Every lane change felt uncertain. Every slight turn of the wheel carried delay. The heater blasted lukewarm air that did little against the creeping cold seeping in through thin door seals. Another skid. Longer this time. His heart jumped hard into his throat. That was enough. He eased off the highway at the next exit, pulse hammering. The off-ramp itself was nearly invisible. Snow streaked sideways in violent sheets, reducing the world to a tunnel of white. He turned onto a smaller road. Worse. No plows, no traffic, just accumulating snow and wind pushing his car sideways. His headlights reflected off the storm instead of cutting through it. He couldn't see. Not properly. When the rear of the car fishtailed again, this time enough that he had to overcorrect, fear finally overrode pride. He pulled onto the shoulder. The engine idled. Wind rocked the car slightly. Snow built up on the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. He stared ahead, breathing hard. He could keep going. Maybe. But if he slid into a ditch in the middle of nowhere with no reception and worsening visibility? That would be worse. He shut the engine off. Silence. Then wind. He checked his phone, 1 weak bar, battery at 42%. He zoomed out on maps. A few scattered residential roads up ahead, not far, maybe a couple miles. He could wait in the car, but without the engine running, it would get cold quickly. And he didn't trust his car to restart after sitting in this temperature. He hadn't brought his heavy winter coat. Why would he? It had been sunny. All his proper winter jackets were at his parents' house. He'd been planning to grab them when he arrived. Stupid. He had a hoodie, a light sweater, jeans, boots, that was it. He stared through the windshield at the swirling white, then at the faint outline of houses on the map. He grabbed his phone, took a breath, and stepped out. The cold hit like a wall, not the gentle kind. The biting, immediate kind that steals breath and fills your nose with ice. Snow soaked through his hoodie within minutes. The snow melted against his body heat and turned instantly to icy dampness. The wind cut straight through denim. His hair, long, dark brown, whipped violently around his face, quickly damp, then heavy. He started walking. At first, it didn't seem so bad. Then the distance stretched. The storm intensified. The road blurred into white-on-white emptiness. Snow clung to his lashes, melted and refroze along his collar. His boots filled slowly with icy moisture. His fingers numbed first, then his ears. His thighs burned, the familiar endurance ache he'd trained through on 100 winter runs. Normally, he welcomed that sensation. Today it dragged. He fell into a rhythm he'd learned on the bike, the climb mindset. He didn't look at the horizon. He looked 3 feet ahead of his boots, counting his breaths in sets of 4. The wind tried to break his pace, but he treated it like a headwind on a coastal road, tucking his chin and focusing on the mechanical repetition of his legs. It wasn't about the cold anymore. It was about the next 10 yards, then the 10 after that. When the silhouette of a house finally materialized through the whiteout, it felt less like a building and more like a hallucination. It was a substantial structure, traditional and steady against the gale. Richard's legs, usually the most reliable part of him, felt like leaden weights as he crested the driveway. He climbed the steps, each movement deliberate and effortful. He raised a hand that didn't quite feel like his own and knocked. The wind howled behind him, a sound that made the solid wood of the door feel like the only border between him and the storm. Then, the latch clicked. The door swung inward, and the storm's roar was instantly muffled by the heavy, insulated quiet of the foyer. Warm air spilled out like mercy. The scent of something floral, faint, clean, clung to the air around her. And there she was, Emily. He hadn't expected to meet her gaze so directly. She was his height. 5'9", give or take. It threw him off more than it should have. She stood there in a pale blue two-piece set soft and luminous against the storm-muted morning. The puff-sleeved top fitted smoothly across her front, the fabric drawn inward by a ruched center seam gathered with a delicate tie. The drawstring shaped the neckline into a gentle sweetheart curve. Lower down, that same gathered tension pulled the center of the top upward, so the hem rose slightly in the middle and dipped lower at the sides, revealing a clear stretch of bare midriff. Across her back, the fabric shifted to fine elastic smocking, textured rose stretching comfortably to mold to her frame without stiffness. The matching skirt sat high on her waist, its own smocked band cinching softly before giving way to two airy tiers gathered into light, fluttering volume. Tiny white florals scattered across the pale blue fabric. The layers fell mid-thigh, brushing against legs shaped by years of disciplined movement, slender, toned, unmistakably strong without ever looking heavy. When she shifted her weight, the skirt lifted slightly, revealing the clean line of her thighs and the subtle lift of muscle beneath smooth skin. She looked petite at first glance. The narrowness of her waist made the gentle curve above and below it more pronounced, a natural hourglass without exaggeration. But the longer he looked, the more balance he saw, the gentle flare of her hips, the lifted ease of her posture, the quiet strength held in her legs and core. Her arms were slim, wrists delicate, hands small and precise, dancer's hands. Even barefoot, she carried herself as though she were still on stage, spine long, shoulders relaxed and soft, collarbones faintly pronounced beneath luminous skin. He didn't know her name yet, but he recognized her instantly from campus. A girl from one of his electives. Dance major, he thought. She was always in flowing skirts and delicate dresses, ribbons sometimes woven into her hair, always smiling. Her dirty blonde hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders, deliberate and glossy even this early in the morning. Her nose tipped upward slightly, small and almost playful against the softness of her features. Her eyes were deep brown and steady, framed by clean mascara-darkened lashes. A wash of shimmer caught the storm-muted light across her lids. A faint highlight along her cheekbones gave her skin a porcelain glow. Her lips were full in a way that made them look perpetually on the verge of a smile, glossed in rose pink, polished but not loud. Her fingernails were painted bright baby blue glitter, glossy, deliberate, perfectly matched to her outfit. The same polish shimmered across her toes when she shifted. Everything about her looked composed. Everything about him was unraveling. Her eyes widened. "Oh my gosh, you're soaked." Her voice was bright, startled, concerned. He tried to speak. "Car storm I parked, I just..." His teeth chattered too hard to finish. "Get in here, obviously. Why are you still outside?" She said, stepping aside dramatically like he was missing something obvious. He stepped inside. The door shut behind him, cutting off the wind like a switch. The warmth hit him like a physical weight, thick and humid compared to the biting, metallic sharpness of the storm. The air here smelled of vanilla and laundry detergent, a dizzying contrast to the scent of ozone and wet wool. His body finally registered the safety, reacting with a shuddering, bone-deep tremor that made his teeth click together like a telegraph. The house was dim, not dark, just muted. The storm outside turned the windows into glowing sheets of white, casting a soft, colorless light through the rooms. "Power S out, by the way," Emily added quickly, brushing snow from his shoulders, her hands pausing for half a second at how slight he felt beneath the soaked layers. It went about half an hour ago. Heat's still working, thankfully. She gave him a sheepish look, which also means the dryer's useless right now. Emily rushed past him toward the coat closet, fumbling for a spare towel she knew her mom kept on the top shelf, then stopped mid-step. "Oh, wait, hi, sorry, I'm Emily." "Richard." "I know," she said automatically, then froze. "I mean from class, not like in a weird way." His expression flickered. Despite the cold, he almost smiled. She was flustered, human, relatable. "You look like you're about to collapse," she said bluntly, grabbing his arm. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he said automatically. He was not fine. His knees felt unstable. His jaw trembled uncontrollably. Her expression softened. "Okay, you're not fine, that's fine, we'll fix that." She helped him shrug off his soaked hoodie, her hands quick but hesitant, like she didn't want to overstep. His sweater underneath clung to him embarrassingly. "Oh no," she murmured. "You're freezing." "Yeah, that part I noticed." She laughed nervously. "Okay, shower now upstairs." He stared at her. "I can't just." "Yes, you can," she insisted gently. "My mom's out of town for a few days. It's just me. And there are 0 men's clothes in this house because," she gestured vaguely, "divorced parents. Dad vanished years ago, and my mom is 5 feet tall and approximately the size of a decorative pillow." Despite himself, he let out a weak laugh. "She's on vacation," Emily added quickly. "And I just got here from campus today. I was planning to do all my laundry here because dorm washers are tragic, so I brought home literally only dirty clothes." She winced, her eyes scanning his shivering frame with a mix of sympathy and practical calculation. "So I don't have many options for you. The only clean things in the house are upstairs in my closet, mostly the summer wardrobe I leave here when I'm away at school. They're clean, just not exactly guy-friendly." She gave him a reassuring smile, though her cheeks pinked slightly. "We'll figure something out, I promise. They're soft and, more importantly, they're dry." She rubbed the back of her neck, clearly apologetic. "You don't have to," he started. "I absolutely do," she said, bubbly and firm. "Because if you go back out there right now, you'll freeze and I'll feel terrible forever." She gave him a reassuring smile. "Come on, upstairs." He followed her, his wet jeans heavy and restrictive, chafing against his skin with every step. He was acutely aware of how the denim was plastered to the muscles of his thighs, the only part of him that felt truly warm from the walk. As he watched the light, airy bounce of her tiered skirt ahead of him, he felt a sudden, logical dread about exactly what summer clothes a feminine girl like Emily kept in her closet. Chapter 2. The hot water felt like a shock to his system. Richard braced his palms against the cool tile wall as steam began to fill the bathroom. His skin burned at first, not painfully, but sharply, as circulation returned to fingers and toes that had nearly gone numb outside. He hadn't realized how close he had been to real trouble. His breathing steadied slowly. Water ran through his long, dark brown hair, flattening it against his shoulders before dripping down his back. He closed his eyes and let the warmth sink in. His hand reached automatically for the first bottle he found. His hand stalled. The label was pastel, curved lettering, gold accents, a small cluster of illustrated flowers near the bottom, coconut and vanilla. He scanned the rest of the shelf. Every bottle was like that, soft colors, floral fonts, words like hydrating silk, nourishing gloss, velvet moisture. Even the body wash was pearl-toned with a faint shimmer suspended inside it. There was nothing neutral, nothing sharp or sport or aggressively charcoal-scented, just sweetness. He hesitated a beat longer than he meant to. "It's soap," he told himself. He squeezed some into his palm. The scent hit immediately: warm coconut, soft vanilla, something creamy and unmistakably feminine. It didn't smell bad. That almost made it worse. He scrubbed quickly and efficiently, almost mechanically, as if that might cancel out the fragrance clinging to his skin. The lather felt different too, smoother, silkier than the cheap all-in-one body wash he used at his apartment. It left his skin almost slippery instead of stripped. He rinsed faster than necessary. His hair wasn't dirty, just previously wet, so he didn't bother with shampoo. When he finally turned his face back into the spray, he was painfully aware of it. He was going to step out of this bathroom smelling like coconut vanilla. Like her temporary, he reminded himself, just until the storm passed. He felt embarrassed, grateful, and a little shaken. He replayed the last 30 minutes in fragments, the skidding tires, the white-out sky, the intense cold. Emily opening the door, she hadn't hesitated, that stuck with him. A soft knock sounded against the bathroom door. He stiffened slightly out of reflex. Richard. Emily's voice came through light but carrying nervous energy. Yeah. Okay, so, clothing situation update. He almost laughed despite himself. That bad. Define bad, she replied quickly. Because if bad means I checked every closet in this house and still couldn't find anything remotely guy-appropriate, then yes. Very. He pushed wet hair back from his face. I even looked for some random old sweatshirt hiding somewhere, she added. No luck. Her voice dipped for a beat. So I had to get creative. He let out a slow breath through his nose. Of course. I'm really sorry, she said quickly. I promise I'm not trying to make this weird. I know, he answered, and he did. She took a breath on the other side of the door. So, she continued, lowering her voice, I went into my old bedroom and looked through what was still in my closet. There weren't many options. His stomach tightened slightly at the way she phrased that. What kind of options? He asked carefully, a beat past. Not the kind a guy would want, she admitted. Silence filled the steam-thick air. They're clean, she added quickly. And dry and warm, but they are definitely not, masculine. He leaned his forehead briefly against the tile. He dragged a hand down his face. I don't love that, he admitted, but I'm not going back out there. Can I just open the door a crack and slide them in? She asked. I won't look, I promise. I don't want you putting those freezing clothes back on. He hesitated. It wasn't the door, it wasn't modesty, it was something else. Yeah, he said finally. The shower continued running. He heard the faint creak of the door opening, barely an inch. Fabric brushed against the counter, then more fabric. It didn't sound like one item. I grabbed a few options, she explained quickly from the other side, just in case one feels less awful than the others. Awful, the word settled heavier than she probably meant it to. They're all pretty girly, she admitted, her voice lowering. I'm really, really sorry. I know that's not something a guy would want to wear. He stared at the tile. And just so you know, she rushed on, I basically put almost everything I still have here in there. He frowned slightly. Here. Yeah, all the stuff I didn't take with me to university. She let out a thin breath, which is, unfortunately, my more extravagant wardrobe. That explained the weight of fabric hitting the counter. I don't really wear most of it that often, she continued. That's kind of why it stayed here instead of coming with me. Then, after a short hesitation, there are still some things I left in the closet, but that's only because they're even more extreme, and I figured you definitely wouldn't want to see those. He wasn't sure if that reassured him or concerned him more. I promise I wasn't trying to handpick the most embarrassing options, she added quickly. This is just what I had that felt even remotely survivable. That shifted something in his chest, so this wasn't curated, it was filtered. Barely. The door eased shut again. Silence returned except for the sound of water hitting tile. He stood there, letting what she'd said settle. Pretty girly. Not something a guy would want to wear. He swallowed. He had never once in his life considered wearing women's clothes. Never wanted to. It wasn't part of who he was. But he also wasn't about to walk back out into a blizzard in soaked jeans out of pride. He shut off the water slowly. Steam lingered in the air. On the other side of the door, he could hear faint movement, probably her pacing. Waiting. Hoping he wouldn't be upset. He stayed where he was a little longer, inside the glass enclosure as the spray faded to silence and steam curled around him. He reached for a towel from the hook just outside the stall, pulling it in to dry himself. He blotted his hair, working from the ends upward until the long, dark strands were just damp. Water traced lightly down his shoulders and back. His frame had never been imposing. Lean through the chest, defined without bulk, his collarbones faintly visible beneath damp skin. There was nothing heavy about him, no thick upper body mass, just long lines and clean angles. From the waist up, he was quite slight. Below that, the proportions shifted. His hips carried more shape than his shoulders suggested, his thighs smooth and defined from miles rather than weight. The strength there didn't widen him, it rounded him subtly. Years of endurance had shaped him differently from the waist down, giving him a balance the rest of him never quite mirrored. His hair had always been long past his shoulders, thick and straight. Drying it took patience. He ran his fingers through it once, separating the strands, then draped the towel around his neck and let the damp weight settle against his shoulder blades. Only then did he step out of the shower. He exhaled once. He turned toward the counter to see what she had left for him. Chapter 3. He looked at the counter, at what waited there. For a few seconds he just stood still. Then he stepped closer. The underwear. The pile was neat, too neat, folded carefully, arranged with intention, and overwhelmingly feminine. Everything looked soft, frilly pastel, lace edges, ruffled trims, tiny bows, light colors that belonged in spring closets and vanity drawers. There wasn't a single neutral tone in sight. He swallowed. His fingers hovered over the stack before he forced himself to touch it. Thong cuts, cheeky cuts, barely their silhouettes that would leave far too much exposed. He shifted uncomfortably. Every piece looked delicate, decorative, rather than practical. Searching the pile with tense, trembling fingers, he finally found something that at least appeared to offer a fraction more coverage. It was pink. Of course it was. Soft blush satin scattered with tiny darker pink heart shapes. 2 tiers of ruffled fabric formed a small, skirt-like layer around the waistband, each tier trimmed in white lace with scalloped edges. The lace was intricate, patterned with looping floral designs, delicate but precise. At the center sat a satin bow, pale and flat against the front. Beneath the layered ruffles, the actual thong base was smooth satin, slightly curved at the edges, structured but stretchy. It was absurdly girly, playful. Decorative, but the layered ruffle skirt would at least fall over part of him. It was the best option. That realization sat heavy in his chest. He stared at them for a long moment. He exhaled slowly. This is happening. He stepped into them. The satin slid up his legs with almost no resistance. It moved cleanly over skin he already kept shaved for cycling, one less thing to think about. The material felt completely different from his usual underwear, softer, cooler, smoother. It didn't grip like cotton or athletic fabric. It glided. If he weren't so worked up over the insanity of the situation, he might have admitted the satin felt nice. Stretchy, light, pleasant against his skin. But he was not in the mood to appreciate that. The waistband settled around his hips with a faint stretch. It fit his waist easily, almost loosely, but adjusted more deliberately lower down. The elastic pressed in at the points where his frame widened again, not sharply, just enough to remind him that his proportions weren't entirely straight. His torso tapered cleanly. Below that taper, the line shifted, not bulky, not heavy, just shaped. His thighs carried the kind of definition built from repetition rather than mass, smooth, firm, controlled. The fabric followed that contour instead of fighting it. He swallowed. It wasn't tight everywhere, but it was tighter than he was used to. The fabric sat closer across the front than any underwear he owned, designed for a shape he didn't share. The stretch accommodated him, but only just. It held him in place rather than giving him space. It didn't resist him. It drew him inward, smoothed him into something narrower, neater, secure, contained, almost sculpted. That unsettled him. The thong portion slid into place next. The satin drew upward smoothly, settling without resistance. The shape there was firmer than the rest of his frame, compact, shaped by distance and repetition, but not angular. The fabric traced that contour cleanly instead of flattening it. He stiffened. He was used to that strength translating into stamina, not silhouette, upward, between. A sensation he was absolutely not used to. A line of fabric settling into territory he had never before asked clothing to occupy. It wasn't painful. It wasn't even truly uncomfortable. But it was impossible to ignore. Every small shift of his weight reminded him it was there. The ruffled tiers rested lightly against his hips and upper thighs, the lace edges brushing his skin with faint movement. He turned slightly toward the mirror before catching himself. No, not yet. The dresses. When he inspected the pile for something to wear, there were dresses and 2-piece sets laid neatly together. All of the tops appeared cropped, All of the skirts looked short. Everything was coordinated, intentional, very girly, too girly. He avoided studying any of them too closely. Instead, he searched the stack of dresses for anything that felt even marginally less revealing than the rest. They were all frilly, all pastel, all designed to soften, but one stood out. The skirt looked slightly longer than the others, still short, but not as severe. He pulled it free. Light blue chiffon scattered with airy floral prints. Soft, flowy. 3 distinct tiers of ruffles cascaded down the skirt, each layer slightly fuller than the one above it. The fabric looked weightless, designed to flutter with even the smallest movement. The bodice was fitted. The material across it was ruched, layers of chiffon gathered horizontally and stacked in delicate lines, creating soft textural ridges from bust to waist. At the neckline, the fabric dipped into a subtle V beneath it. A small triangular cutout rested just under the bust, a delicate sliver of exposed skin framed by gathered chiffon. The ruching between the bust pulled inward firmly, forming 2 unmistakable rounded curves beneath the chiffon. And inside, padded cups, not extreme, not corset-level dramatic, but structured, firm enough to hold shape even without him inside them. They weren't decorative, they were built to create something. He turned the dress around. The back tapered into a soft V shape as well, narrowing slightly toward the center where a zipper ran cleanly down the spine. He reached for it automatically and pulled the zipper down first. The bodice loosened slightly in his hands. Good. He stepped into the dress carefully. The chiffon brushed over his thighs, and then over the ruffled panties. The satin and lace beneath shifted subtly as the lining of the dress slid over them. The chiffon skirt floated over the tiered ruffles underneath, the fabrics whispering against each other with faint friction. He pulled the bodice up. The snug fit became immediately obvious. It hugged his waist closely, like a glove. He slid the straps over his shoulders. At least he already shaved under his arms. The sleeveless cut didn't leave anything visibly out of place. Then reached back, fingers fumbling slightly as he located the zipper. He pulled it upward slowly. The bodice tightened, smoothed, secured him into place. The padded cup settled against his chest. The structure didn't just smooth the fabric, it directed it. Lifted, rounded, defined. 2 distinct curves where his chest had always been a straight plane. The illusion wasn't exaggerated. That was what made it convincing. From the front, there was no ambiguity about what the dress was designed to imply. From the front, the V neckline and the small triangular cutout beneath emphasized the illusion, drawing the eye toward curves created by careful stitching and padding. His waist looked narrower, his torso shaped into something softer. The 3-tiered chiffon skirt flared lightly from his hips, the ruffles moving with the slightest shift of his weight. The flare wasn't dramatic, but it wasn't straight either. Narrow through the shoulders, tapering into a slim waist, then shifting subtly outward before dropping into lean, defined thighs. The proportions weren't exaggerated, but they weren't rigid. The chiffon didn't create the shape, it revealed it. There was nothing rough or visibly masculine interrupting the line of it, just fabric falling cleanly against him. The dress felt different over the panties, layered, soft over satin, chiffon floating over lace. He moved and the skirt fluttered light, airy, almost playful. The irritation returned. It didn't feel wrong. It felt seamless. That was the problem. The socks. Near the counter sat 2 pairs of frilly ankle socks. Beside them, longer lace hosiery, stockings. He stared at them a beat longer. A slow wave of irritation rose in his chest. Stockings, seriously. Then he remembered. She had said she just pulled almost everything she had, that she hadn't carefully curated it, that she'd only left the worst of it in the closet. That took some of the edge off. Not all of it, but some. He looked back at the ankle socks. They were identical except for color, one white, one soft pastel blue. He picked up the blue pair. Blue for boys, he muttered under his breath. Even the socks she owned were this girly. The body of the sock was thin net nylon, delicate and breathable, patterned with vertical lines of tiny heart-shaped designs woven into the fabric. The knit was intricate, almost lace-like, decorative rather than practical. At the top, a gathered lace ring circled the opening, layered in soft ruffles. The lace flared outward slightly, adding volume around the ankle, a little pop of texture that felt dramatically unnecessary. They were absurd. He sat down slowly and slid one over his foot. The nylon stretched easily, molding to him without resistance. It was far thinner than any sock he owned, closer to hosiery than athletic wear. Light, barely there. The lace at the ankle settled in a soft halo around his lower leg. He pulled the second one on, then stood. The pale blue matched the chiffon of his dress almost perfectly. He looked down. The three-tiered skirt fell mid-thigh, the airy layers resting several inches above his knees. The lace-trimmed ruffles of the socks echoed the ruffled tiers of the dress. Even the softness of the blue tones aligned. It looked coordinated, on purpose. That irritated him more than anything. He lifted his gaze slowly. The mirror was clear now. There was no steam left to hide behind. Briefly, he didn't recognize the person staring back. The pastel blue chiffon rested softly against his frame, but the structured bodice did more than soften him. It reshaped him. The padded cups rounded outward distinctly, creating a silhouette that was unmistakably feminine. The neckline framed the curve deliberately. There was no ambiguity in it. The triangular cutout drew the eye inward. The three tiers of ruffles floated lightly around his thighs. Below, the lace-ringed socks framed his ankles in delicate halos, their tiny heart-knit pattern barely visible unless you looked closely. Everything matched. Everything softened him. There was nothing breaking the illusion, no body hair, no hard visual edge pushing back against the shape the dress created. His proportions cooperated with it. That felt like a betrayal. But right now, the mirror didn't reflect guy in a dress. It reflected a soft-featured college girl, and that unsettled him far more than the lace ever could. He swallowed. The reflection that stared back at him looked delicate, pretty, convincing. The word flickered in his mind again, unwanted, beautiful, and he felt a sharp, irritating flicker of annoyance that it worked so well. He shifted his weight. The satin panties moved subtly beneath the lining of the dress, a smooth glide of fabric against fabric. The thong reminded him of its presence with the smallest adjustment. The chiffon skirt fluttered with the motion, airy and effortless. The lace at his ankles brushed faintly against his skin, layered softness, everywhere. He hadn't chosen this. He wasn't enjoying it. He was surviving a snowstorm. That was all this was, practical, temporary, and yet, if someone walked in right now, they wouldn't see Richard. They'd see a girl, not a joke, not a costume, not a guy awkwardly wearing something that didn't belong to him. They would see someone who seemingly belonged in that dress, someone effortless in it, and that fact pressed heavier than the zipper ever had. He stood there for a long moment, breathing, processing, still himself, still Richard, under the satin, under the chiffon, under the lace, but wrapped in fabric that told an entirely different story. And the worst part, it fit not loosely, not ironically, not like a borrowed joke. It fit like it was meant to. The bodice shaped him. The skirt moved with him, the socks softened the whole effect. Nothing strained, nothing looked out of place. That was what unsettled him most of all. He reached for the door handle, reluctant, frustrated, still very much himself, but dressed in something that told a completely different story. Chapter 4. Oh well. Here goes nothing. Richard stood outside the bathroom door for a full 3 seconds before forcing himself to move. The hallway felt longer than it had that morning. The chiffon skirt skimmed high against his smooth thighs with each reluctant step. The 3 airy tears whispered when he walked, light, fluttering, impossible to ignore. The ruched bodice held firm at his waist, structured and shaping, the padded cups giving the front of the dress a contour he was still hyper-aware of. Beneath it, the layered pink ruffles of the thong shifted faintly when he moved. The satin felt smooth against his skin, but the narrow back strap was a constant reminder, present, unfamiliar, impossible to forget. Every step brought a quiet awareness of it beneath the airy chiffon. The pale blue lace-knit socks hugged his ankles, the ruffled trim grazing softly against his skin. Delicate, decorative, coordinated, he felt exposed. Not because anything showed, nothing did, but because everything felt intentional. He exhaled slowly. It's just her. She already knows. Still, his pulse ticked up as he approached the doorway to Emily's old bedroom. The door was partially open. Soft, white stormlight drifted into the hallway from the windows inside. He stepped inside. Emily turned and froze. At first, she didn't see the dress. She saw him. The narrow line of his shoulders beneath thin straps. The clean taper into his waist. The softness of his face, smooth skin, no rough angles, no heavy jaw. His features leaned delicate rather than rugged, framed now by long dark hair that fell past his shoulders in damp, straight lines. He didn't look like a guy squeezing himself into something borrowed. He looked like someone the fabric had anticipated. And that caught her off guard. Barefoot, straight-backed, ballet-trained, soft, luminous, intentional. And now he was standing across from her in chiffon that echoed her own silhouette. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. She only stared. Richard felt heat crawl up his neck. "Okay," he said dryly, folding his arms awkwardly across his chest. "You can laugh." "I'm not laughing," she said. And she was. Her gaze drifted downward, not boldly, just absorbing, the slim structure of his torso. The way the bodice defined how narrow he actually was above the waist. And then lower. The shift in proportion. His waist tapered cleanly before giving way to hips that carried more shape than she would have guessed. His thighs weren't bulky, just smooth, firm, subtly curved from endurance rather than weightlifting. The skirt didn't hang straight. It followed him. Her eyes lifted again, more slowly this time. Something in her expression changed. Warmer. Her breath caught, barely noticeable, but there. "Oh," she said, like she hadn't expected it to look that right. "You smell like my shower," she said, quieter now. He blinked. "What?" She moved nearer, almost unconsciously. "Coconut vanilla." His stomach tightened. The scent belonged to her world. On him, it felt like a quiet trespass. "I used what was in there." "I know." Her gloss caught the light as she smiled faintly, that rose-pink shine soft but unmistakable. A sweep of highlight shimmered along her cheekbones when she tilted her head, catching the pale daylight filtering in from the windows. "I just didn't expect it to suit you." That did not help. The skirt shifted lightly as he adjusted his stance, chiffon fluttering. The movement tugged faintly at the waistband beneath it, the thong steady and unmoving compared to the softness above, a contrast he couldn't ignore. "Richard," she breathed, almost in disbelief. "You look really pretty." The bodice flexed faintly as he exhaled, the structured seam at his waist holding its tailored shape. "That's not helping." "No, I'm serious," she insisted, moving a little nearer. The tiered hem of her own skirt swayed lightly against her legs as she moved, tiny white florals shifting with each careful step. "I thought it would be awkward, or silly, but it's not." Her gaze moved over him again, more thoughtfully this time. Not searching for flaws, just tracing lines the way everything flowed together. "You don't look like you're wearing a costume," she added. "It just fits." He swallowed. She circled him slowly, thoughtful, assessing. There was something almost choreographed about it. The chiffon skirt tickled his skin as she moved around him, the layers lifting with the air and settling again. Her posture remained effortlessly straight, years of dance visible in every quiet shift of weight. "I'm surprised that fits you," she said, "although I do buy things slightly oversized sometimes." "That's one of my old favorites," she added softly. Bright baby blue glitter flashed at the tips of her fingers as her hand lifted, the same shimmering polish coating her bare toes against the hardwood floor. The playful sparkle caught the light as her fingertips traced the edge of his skirt near his hip, barely disturbing the chiffon before retreating. "It always sat weird at my waist. On you it's perfect." He let out a breath that was half laugh, half exasperation. "Fantastic. Exactly what every guy wants to hear." She smiled, bright, genuine. "I mean it in a good way." He rubbed the back of his neck, careful not to disturb the thin straps resting on his shoulders. The exposed cut left little room to hide behind. "I feel ridiculous." "You don't look ridiculous," she said immediately. He met her eyes, no teasing, no judgment. Her gaze dipped again, quieter now, lingering briefly at the structured shaping beneath the ruched fabric before returning to his face. "You just have the kind of build my clothes really like," she admitted, quieter now. "You're slim in all the right places, it just works." He felt his face warm further. "I'm not trying to model them." "I know," she smiled faintly. "I'm just saying." She tilted her head. "You actually look kind of sexy," she said, as if the word surprised her. His stomach flipped unexpectedly. For a split second he remembered the mirror upstairs, the unfamiliar silhouette that had somehow still looked like him. "That's worse," he muttered, though a reluctant smile tugged at his mouth. She laughed under her breath. I can't help it. I like a guy who's comfortable enough to not completely lose his mind over fabric. I am not comfortable, he corrected. Okay, she amended, grinning. A guy who can survive fabric. He shifted again, and the movement made him aware once more of how little there was beneath the dress compared to what he was used to. Airy chiffon above, barely there satin and elastic below. She stepped nearer again. Wait, turn a little. No, just a little. Emily. She pouted playfully. I just want to see how it moves. He sighed and turned slightly. The skirt flared gently, the 3 tiers lifting and settling like soft waves. Her expression softened. It looks really good on you, she repeated quietly. There was something different in her voice now. Quieter, intent. Standing nearly level with each other in the same color palette, the difference between them felt smaller than it should have. He became acutely aware of it, the symmetry. Mid-thigh hems, pale blue tones, soft fabric. Nothing about him disrupted it. The silhouette held steady, her bare feet on the floor, his lace-trimmed socks echoing her ruffles. You know, she added thoughtfully, eyes glinting faintly, I'm kind of curious. His eyes narrowed. About what? She tried and failed to hide a small smile. What you picked. His stomach dropped. Don't. There were options, she said lightly. He crossed his arms tighter. You're not getting details. She laughed, clearly enjoying his reaction. Okay, I'll behave. For now, the air shifted again. He searched her face for judgment, found none, instead warmth, interest, something almost breathless. I'm not laughing because I think it's funny, she said. I know. I just think it's kind of amazing. Amazing, he echoed skeptically. She lifted a shoulder. You didn't freak out, you adapted. I almost freaked out. But you didn't. She smiled, and I kind of like that. Despite the lace and ruffles, despite the unfamiliar layering beneath chiffon, he was still him. And she was looking at him like she liked what she saw. I'm really glad you knocked today, she said. He met her gaze. Me too. And for the first time since stepping into the dress, his frustration eased, because this wasn't mockery. It wasn't a joke. It was just the two of them snowed in, standing too close, discovering something neither of them had planned. A strange, unexpected moment. And Emily looked almost breathless, like she discovered something she hadn't realized she wanted. A guy who smelled like coconut vanilla, wore lace and chiffon, and still stood there, awkward, defensive, undeniably himself. Chapter 5. Emily clapped her hands together lightly. Okay, she said brightly, as if they hadn't just shared a charged, quietly intimate moment. If you're going to be stuck here because of the snow, you at least deserve the grand tour. Richard blinked. The grand tour. Yes, of my childhood kingdom. He arched an eyebrow. I'm in a dress. All the more reason, she teased, already stepping toward her bedroom door. Royal attire. He sighed but followed, trying to keep his mind off of his current attire. This was, however, quite difficult, considering the built-in padding giving the front a contour he couldn't stop noticing in his peripheral vision. He forced himself not to think about it. Instead, he focused on her. Upstairs. Emily stepped into the upstairs hallway first. It opened into a railing overlook, dark wooden banisters, framing a clear view into the living room below. The space stretched upward in one continuous 2-story expanse, the ceiling level with the upstairs hallway, nothing separating the floors but air and railing. From above, the stone fireplace anchored the far wall while tall windows flooded the vertical space with diffused winter light. Snow drifted steadily past the glass. Beyond the yard, open farmland stretched white and uninterrupted, no neighboring roofs breaking the horizon. The house felt quiet, self-contained. That's my mom's, Emily said, gesturing down the hall before leading him to a large door. Her mom's master suite was enormous, not flashy but expansive. A wide bed centered against a soft-toned wall. Matching nightstands, a sitting area near tall windows framed with cream curtains. Hardwood floors softened by a large woven rug. The scale alone made it clear this was the primary bedroom, proportional to the house's size. It's huge, Richard admitted. They stepped back into the hallway. She gestured casually toward the familiar door. Bathrooms here, as you know. A small flicker of amusement crossed her expression, but she didn't linger on it. "Okay," she said lightly. "Now downstairs." She started down the staircase, her hand brushing the dark wooden banister. Richard followed. With each step, the open vertical space shifted around them, the overlook giving way to immersion. The fireplace climbed toward eye level. The tall windows widened into full height. The pale winter light settled evenly across the hardwood floors. By the time they reached the bottom, the living room no longer felt architectural. It felt lived in. The house main floor. The living room opened immediately at the base of the stairs. It was spacious but grounded, a stone fireplace anchoring one wall, a very tall ceiling rising overhead without feeling grand. Tall windows framed with cream curtains poured in snow-bright daylight, diffused by the steady snowfall outside. The room felt calm, steady, established. From here, the rest of the main floor flowed naturally. Hardwood floors stretched outward into a hallway where family photos of Emily and her mom were arranged neatly along one wall, organized, intentional but not cluttered. Emily moved easily through the space, narrating as they went. "This is the formal dining room," she said, sweeping a hand toward a long polished table arranged with quiet symmetry. It sat slightly off the main flow, composed, ready for hosting, but clearly not lived in daily. "We never actually use it unless someone important comes over, which is basically never." He smiled faintly. "I like it," he admitted. "It feels calm." She glanced back at him, pleased. "You're very observant." He shrugged. "Engineering brain, I notice structure." They passed into the kitchen, renovated 2 years ago. White cabinetry, marble countertops, copper fixtures that warmed the brightness of the stone and paint. Near one of the tall windows sat a wooden kitchen table, softened by winter light, clearly where real meals happened instead of in the formal dining room. "My mom redid this 2 years ago," Emily explained. "She's tiny but terrifying when she's determined. Contractors don't stand a chance." Richard laughed genuinely. The sound surprised him. He hadn't realized how tense he'd been until that moment. Connected off the living room was a sunroom, brighter, more exposed, walls of glass overlooking the backyard. Snow blanketed the landscaped yard. Wind moved in soft gusts across the open farmland before pressing faintly against the windows. All the while, Emily talked, effortlessly. Stories spilled from her about childhood birthday parties, burning cookies at 12, piano lessons she eventually quit. And somewhere between the kitchen and the sunroom, Richard realized something strange. He wasn't thinking about the dress. Not constantly. Not obsessively. He was thinking about her voice. The way it lifted when she got excited. The way she gestured with her hands when describing something dramatic. She was bubbly in the most genuine way, not forced. Not overly loud, just naturally expressive. He liked that more than he expected. The living room. Eventually they circled back and settled in the living room, curling up on opposite ends of the long sofa. Outside, flakes drifted steadily past the glass. The nearest road was invisible beneath snow. Open fields stretched outward in blank silence. A faint gust pressed against the windows, snow whispering softly before settling again. Richard turned to sit. And immediately realized he had not thought this through. The tiered chiffon fluttered upward as he dropped onto the cushion, fanning lightly over his lap before settling much higher than he intended. His legs were spread wide like he would normally sit while wearing men's clothing. Emily's eyes flicked down. There was a brief pause before she blinked once. "Oh," she murmured. Richard followed her gaze and felt his stomach drop. A smooth flash of satin and delicate trim had been unmistakably visible in the bright winter light. He squeezed his legs together and tugged the hem down far too late. He cleared his throat. "That was not intentional." Emily's lips curved despite her best effort to stay composed. "I figured," she said. "I just wasn't expecting the reveal." His ears burned. She tilted her head slightly, tone light but not sharp. "Well, I guess I don't have to wonder what you picked to wear underneath." He groaned under his breath and folded his arms. "I didn't pick them for presentation." "I like your taste," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You picked well." She hesitated, then added in a quieter, almost nostalgic tone. Those were actually one of my favorites. He glanced at her. The satin ones, she clarified. I thought I lost them when I moved for university. They weren't in any of my boxes. He looked down at his lap again, mortified. Well, he muttered, you can have them back whenever you want. She smiled, smaller this time, less mischievous. That's sweet, she said, but I think they look nice on you. He made a sour face at her. She quickly added, gentler, I mean they suit the outfit. The colors work. That's not better. She covered her mouth with a laugh. Sorry, that came out wrong. Outside, another soft gust brushed the siding. She shifted forward slightly. Okay, actual helpful note. You sat down wrong. He frowned. There's a right way. With something that flowy, yes. She rose smoothly from the sofa, and even that looked deliberate. The pale blue skirt fluttered around her thighs as she stood. The smocked waistband hugged her waist before loosening into two airy tiers that moved easily with her. When she turned slightly, the fabric lifted just enough to reveal the athletic line of her legs beneath, dancer strong, steady, balanced even barefoot on hardwood. She faced him again, and this time demonstrated properly. With an easy, practiced motion, she reached behind her, gathering the back of her own skirt lightly in one hand. Then she lowered herself gracefully onto the cushion, back straight, knees angled, releasing the fabric only once she was fully seated. The tears settled perfectly over her thighs. Nothing shifted, nothing fluttered upward. It looked effortless. Richard stared. You rehearsed that, he accused. She smiled faintly. Years of dance. And having to sit in recital dresses that were way shorter than they should have been. He glanced at her legs, long, aligned, composed, the skirt brushing mid-thigh without threatening to misbehave. On her, it looked natural, controlled. On him, moments ago, it had looked like a malfunction. It's just physics, she added gently. Light fabric plus momentum equals surprise. He stood reluctantly. She watched, not smug, just patient. He mimicked her motion, gathering the chiffon at the back before lowering himself carefully this time. The skirt settled more neatly, the tears draping over his thighs instead of fanning upward. He adjusted once, then crossed his legs carefully, trying to keep the whole effect contained and deliberate. Emily gave an approving nod. See, much better. He exhaled slowly. I feel like I'm in a training seminar. Well, she said lightly, smoothing a hand over her own skirt absent-mindedly. You are new to skirts. He gave her a look. She softened. You're doing fine. And this time, when he glanced at her sitting there, poised, ballet straight, the pale blue fabric resting perfectly over Dancer's legs, he understood the difference. For her, it was instinct. For him, it was deliberate. But at least now, it wasn't accidental. Emily tucked one leg under herself and turned toward him. So, she said, leaning her chin into her hand, studying him. Tell me about you. He gave her a dry look. There's not much to tell. Wrong answer, she grinned. Start with university. What made you pick engineering? He relaxed back slightly, careful not to tug at the hem. I like solving problems, he said simply. I like when something doesn't work and you can break it down and figure out why. She nodded, listening intently. Mechanical. Civil. Ooh, she said playfully. Bridges and skyscrapers. Hopefully not collapsing ones. She laughed. The sound was light and bright and infectious. And cycling, she asked. You mentioned that earlier. His posture shifted subtly but noticeably. That was different. That was something he loved. Yeah, he said, more animated now. I've been riding since high school. I compete sometimes. Nothing crazy, just regional stuff. That's amazing. He shrugged, though he couldn't fully hide the pride. I like the discipline of it. The endurance, it's kind of meditative. She tilted her head. That explains you. Explains what? You're calm, she said, centered. He almost laughed at the irony. I try, he said. She smiled softly. I like that. There it was again, that subtle warmth. Her turn. And you, he asked, what made you pick fashion? Her eyes lit up instantly. Oh, that's easy. I've loved clothes since I was little. Not just wearing them, designing them. The structure, the fabric, how something can change how you feel. His gaze flickered briefly, involuntarily, to the pale blue chiffon pooled around his thighs. She noticed. A faint smirk touched her lips. "See," she said. He exhaled through his nose. "I'm not admitting anything." She laughed. "But really," she continued, settling back, "fashion is storytelling. You can communicate confidence, softness, rebellion, all without saying a word." "That's actually kind of brilliant," he admitted. She blinked. "You think so?" "Yeah." She held his gaze for a beat longer than necessary, then looked away, almost shy. "And dance," she added. He tilted his head slightly. "So, you're a dance major, right?" She smiled faintly. "No, I'm a fashion major." He blinked. "Oh. I minor in dance," she clarified. "I still take classes, still train. I just realized I love it more when it isn't the only thing defining me." Something about the way she said it felt practiced, thought through. "I competed my whole life," she continued. "Mostly ballet. That was always the focus." "You danced competitively?" he asked. Her whole expression shifted, not bubbly, not playful, but something deeper. "I did ballet," she said, "for most of my life." He straightened slightly. The bodice seemed to encourage it, holding his posture more upright without much effort. "Like, casually." She gave him a look. "No." He laughed under his breath. "Okay, not casually." "I trained 5 days a week," she explained. "From when I was young until the end of high school, pre-professional level, intensives, competitions, the whole thing." "Wow." Her body suddenly made sense. The posture, the subtle strength, the way even sitting still she seemed aligned. "It was everything," she continued. "Discipline, art, pain, obsession." He watched her carefully. "You miss it." She nodded once. "Sometimes my body doesn't." A small smile touched her mouth. "I shifted my focus to fashion this year," she added more quietly. "I realized I love movement, but I love building the movement just as much, designing for it, understanding how fabric supports the body, how it frames it." That tracked entirely. He glanced down again at the ruched bodice structured around his torso. "You don't exactly design casually," he muttered, her lips curved. "No, I don't." She flexed her foot unconsciously, precise even in rest. "Ballet teaches control," she said thoughtfully. "You learn how to hold yourself, how to endure discomfort, how to make something difficult look effortless." He swallowed lightly. He became suddenly aware again of how he was sitting, the way the ruched bodice held him aligned, the way the tiered chiffon skirt fanned softly around him. "You actually have the build for it," she said, and only then seemed to realize she'd said it aloud. He stared at her. "For ballet." Long lines, slim frame, strong legs. He gave her a deadpan look. "Please don't." She laughed immediately. "I'm not recruiting you." Good. Though something about the way she studied him lingered. Not mockery, curiosity, intrigue. A shift. Time passed without either of them noticing. They talked about professors they disliked, about dorm disasters, about childhood dreams. She told him about performing on stage under bright theater lights. He told her about crashing his bike during a rain race and finishing anyway. They teased each other gently, challenged each other's opinions. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the awkwardness of fabric faded further into the background. Richard found himself leaning forward when she spoke, watching her hands move, following the subtle strength in her posture, noticing the elegance that never really left her body. She was beautiful, and she was looking at him with growing interest. He had stopped tugging self-consciously at the hem, stopped adjusting the thin straps at his shoulders. He wasn't thinking about how ridiculous he felt. He was thinking about how much he didn't want this day to end. And across from him, Emily rested her chin in her palm again, watching him with an expression that was no longer just friendly. It held a quiet curiosity that was beginning to deepen into something more. Chapter 6. By early afternoon, the house had grown quieter. The snow outside hadn't slowed. Thick white drifts continued to press against the lower windows, and the sky remained a heavy, endless gray. The power still hadn't returned. "Tea solves everything," she declared, carefully pouring hot water into 2 ceramic mugs which she had heated on the gas stove. And if it doesn't, cheese will. Richard, still acutely aware of the way the sweetheart curve pressed and lifted across his chest, leaned lightly against the counter, conscious of how the structure held even when he tried to forget it. "You're very confident about that." "I'm always confident about cheese." She assembled a small charcuterie board, sliced apples, crackers, brie, sharp cheddar, a handful of grapes. It was simple, but she arranged it with aesthetic care, as if even a power outage deserved presentation. He noticed that about her. Even small things felt considered. They carried everything into the living room and settled on the floor near the coffee table. Richard lowered himself automatically, starting to fold one leg over the other. "Wait," Emily said. He froze halfway down. "What?" "You're on the floor now. Different rules." He sighed. "There are floor rules." "There are always rules." She sank down first, demonstrating without fanfare. The pale blue skirt pooled softly around her as she bent both legs to one side, knees angled forward, feet tucked neatly behind her hip. The tears draped naturally over her thighs, no shifting, no adjusting needed. It looked effortless. "Like that," she said. "It keeps everything in place." He glanced down at his own skirt. "Oh." He tried to imitate the motion, bending both legs to one side. The chiffon shifted at first, then settled once he adjusted the waistband slightly. It felt different, less casual, more deliberate but stable. The movement pulled faintly at the elastic beneath, reminding him that everything under the skirt was minimal by design, nothing forgiving, nothing excess, just carefully held in place. "There," she said approvingly. "Cross-legged is fine sometimes, but with something shorter, safer to angle." "I need a manual," he muttered. "You have one," she replied lightly, nudging the tea toward him. This time, when he settled his weight, the skirt stayed where it belonged. Somewhere in the walls, the house gave a soft, settling creak, the quiet deepening again afterward. Board games and laughter. They played an old board game she found in a cabinet, something from her childhood. It turned competitive quickly. "You absolutely cheated," she accused, narrowing her eyes playfully. "I absolutely did not." "You moved that piece." "I adjusted it." "That's cheating." He smirked. She leaned across the board, her dirty blonde hair falling forward over her shoulder. "You're insufferable." "You're losing." She gasped dramatically. The sound made him laugh, real, unguarded. "Painting." When the game ended in a highly disputed draw, Emily clapped once. "New activity." She disappeared briefly and returned with small canvases, acrylic paints, and brushes. "We're painting." He asked. "Yes, don't complain, it's very artsy." "I'm an engineer." "You can paint a bridge." He rolled his eyes but took a brush. They sat side by side on the floor, canvases propped against the coffee table. She hummed lightly while mixing colors, occasionally tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. After a minute, she paused. "Oh, wait." She reached over and slid open one of the shallow drawers built into the coffee table. After rummaging briefly, she pulled out a large butterfly claw clip. Pearly and iridescent, its wings marbled in soft pastel tones that caught the muted daylight. She gathered her hair quickly at the back of her head, twisting it upward in one fluid motion. The movement was practiced, a simple roll and lift, before she secured it with the butterfly clip, letting a few loose tendrils fall deliberately around her face and neck. The clip sat centered at the back of her head, the wings spreading across the bun like something decorative rather than practical. The whole thing looked effortless. She returned to her painting without ceremony. Richard tried to focus on his own canvas, a snowy tree line with exaggerated structural symmetry. But as he leaned forward, his longer dark hair slipped into his line of sight. He blew upward in annoyance. It fell back down. Emily glanced over. "Hold on." Before he could ask what she meant, she reached into the drawer again and pulled out an oversized white scrunchie. It was soft and voluminous, layers of sheer, slightly ruffled fabric gathered thickly into a cloud-like ring. Not satin slick, but airy, plush, almost delicate. She held it up between 2 fingers. "Turn your head." He hesitated. "Why?" "Your hair is attacking the canvas." He sighed but complied, angling toward her. She shifted closer on her knees. "Stay still." Her fingers slid lightly through his hair first, combing it back from his forehead. Her touch was efficient but gentle, gathering the loose strands, collecting them at the crown. She twisted the length once, then again, wrapping it into a loose coil. The scrunchie stretched around the bundle of hair, once, twice, before snapping back snugly in place. She tugged lightly at a few pieces to loosen it, creating a messy bun rather than something tight and precise. A couple of strands escaped intentionally near his temples. She leaned back to assess her work. Perfect. He reached up instinctively, fingers brushing the soft, ruffled fabric now perched at the back of his head. It felt large and unmistakably decorative. "Don't mess with it," she warned lightly, swatting his hand away. "It looks cute." He gave her a look. She smiled, not bold, just amused. "It suits you." He sighed. "This is temporary." "Obviously." He dropped his hand and turned back to his canvas. The bun held. His hair stayed out of his eyes, and admittedly it was easier to paint. She leaned over to peek at his progress. "That is aggressively organized." "Thank you." She laughed again. While reaching for another brush, her elbow clipped the plastic cup of water beside her. Time slowed. The cup tipped. Water cascaded directly into his lap. Cold soaked instantly through the chiffon skirt, seeping through the layers and into the fabric beneath. The chill hit deeper than he expected, fabric collapsing inward, clinging in a way the dry chiffon never had. Lightness vanished. Everything adhered. He jolted upright. "Oh my God!" Emily gasped. The wet fabric clung immediately, darker blue blooming across the front of the dress. He stared down. She stared down. Then they both burst out laughing. "I am so sorry," she said between breaths. "I swear I'm not sabotaging you." "It's freezing," he muttered, though he couldn't stop smiling. The water had soaked through fully. Even the waistband of the panties beneath now felt uncomfortably damp against his skin. He let out a breath. "Well," he said dryly, "guess I'm changing." She pressed her lips together to contain another laugh. Round two. Back to the bathroom. She led him upstairs again, light on her feet. Behind her he followed, and with each step, the loose bun at the back of his head gave a small, soft bob. Not exaggerated, just a gentle bounce. The plush white scrunchie shifting faintly against his dark hair, the coil not quite rigid enough to stay perfectly still. When they reached the bathroom, the remaining clothing options still lay carefully arranged across the counter. Pastel lace, structured bodices, layered skirts waiting their turn. He paused in the doorway. "You're enjoying this way too much," he said. "Maybe a little," she admitted, leaning casually against the frame. He stepped inside and pulled the door nearly closed this time, not fully latched, but enough to give himself space. The damp dress peeled upward slowly. The chiffon resisted at first, clinging to his thighs before releasing with a faint, cool drag. When the sweetheart neckline slipped past his shoulders, the chill in the room made him shiver again. The panties were worse. The lace, once feather-light, now clung damply against his hips. He grimaced. "Fantastic." He slid them down quickly, stepping free and dropping both soaked pieces into the hamper. The air felt colder without the layers, exposed and strangely quiet. He only stood there, looking at what remained laid out on the counter, neatly folded. Pieces Emily had once chosen for herself and kept. His gaze settled on the rose pair. Deeper in tone than the first ones he'd worn, not bright pink, but a muted blush with warmth to it. The front panel was smooth and soft-looking, framed by three-dimensional floral lace that rose slightly from the surface instead of lying flat. The lace wasn't stiff. It had structure without harshness. A small bow rested at the center front, subtle but deliberate. He turned them over. The back narrowed into a minimal cut, lace tapering before meeting a thin ribbon that crossed lightly near the top. Decorative but designed to draw the eye to the curve of the waist. He swallowed. They were undeniably bold, not practical, not neutral. They were made to be seen. He traced his thumb once along the lace edge. It felt softer than it looked, flexible, almost weightless. He stepped into them carefully, one foot, then the other. The elastic slid up along his legs, cool at first, then warming as it settled against his skin. He drew them up slowly. The waistband found his hips with surprising precision, snug without digging. The lace flexed as it adjusted, the front panel lying smooth and centered. The crossed ribbon at the back shifted subtly as he straightened, settling into place. He turned slightly toward the mirror. The rose shade softened the lines of his waist. The minimal back left little room for hiding. He let out a breath. Unbelievable. He stayed there in the quiet bathroom, the faint hum of wind pressing against the siding outside. The remaining options were still spread across the counter: pastel lace, flared skirts, matching sets that looked like they belonged in a summer catalog. His eyes skimmed over a couple of two-piece outfits first. Crop tops, tiny skirts, pleats that looked like they would flutter upward if he so much as breathed wrong. He grimaced. There was no way he was trusting something that lightweight and short. He could already imagine bending slightly and flashing bright pink lace to the entire upstairs hallway. Absolutely not. His gaze shifted. The bodycon dress lay on the edge of the counter. Pink, deeper than the chiffon from earlier, sleeker, less innocent. He picked it up. Immediately he could tell this one was different. The top wasn't just fabric, it was structured. Black lace edged the neckline, peeking upward like a built-in bra. Thin black straps with adjusters. A small hook closure at the back, unmistakably bra-like. The band was lace too, designed to clasp below the shoulder blades before the ruched body of the dress continued downward. He turned it over in his hands. It was sheer in places, unlined. The ruching gathered tightly down the entire front and the entire back, creating that scrunched effect that shortened the hemline even more in the back. He hesitated. Then, because the alternative was a pleated miniskirt with betrayal built into its design, he stepped into it. The polyester fabric slid upward smoothly over his calves, over his thighs, no resistance at first as it rose. Then it caught not on the lace, but on him. A brief, undeniable interruption at the front, the fabric pulling tight over the shape beneath it. He stilled. "Of course," he muttered. The ruching stretched thin across him, outlining more than he'd anticipated. The material was unforgiving, elastic and clingy and far too honest. He tugged it higher anyway. The dress clung immediately. The ruching tightened as it rose, compressing gently against his hips and waist, smoothing itself along his frame like it had been tailored for him. When it reached his chest, he paused. The cups were heavier than the previous dress. He adjusted the straps over his shoulders and reached behind him, fingers fumbling briefly before finding the hook closure. It clicked into place with a soft metallic snap, just like fastening a bra. He froze. The band hugged across his back, firm and deliberate. He looked down. The lace edge framed the top of the cups, and just beneath it sat a tiny black bow, right in the middle, absurdly delicate, ridiculously calculated. He pressed experimentally against one cup. It barely moved. Foam, push-up padding, built-in underwire. "Are you kidding me?" He muttered. The change was immediate, lifted, projected, rounded far beyond his natural line. He squeezed again just to confirm. Yes. Definitely some heavy padding. He breathed out through his nose. The rest of the dress adhered to him completely now. The ruching gathered at his waist, hugging his torso tightly, not restrictive, but constant. Like being wrapped in elastic from collarbone to mid-thigh. He looked down. The front was another matter. The stretch of fabric over the protruding shape beneath left very little to the imagination. No. He was not walking back out there like that. He glanced toward the door instinctively, as if it might judge him. "Absolutely not," he murmured. He hooked his fingers lightly under the hem of the dress and lifted it a few inches, exposing the thin lace thong beneath. The interruption was obvious now, the fabric simply following the shape. It had nowhere else to go. He let out a breath. This was ridiculous. He pulled the thong down just enough to adjust himself, shifting everything backward until the front lay flatter beneath the lace. Then he gave the waistband a firm tug, sliding it back into place so it held everything securely between his legs. He lowered the hem again. The fabric slid back into place. He checked the mirror. Better. Still tight. Still short. Deeply questionable. But at least no longer announcing itself. He straightened his shoulders, smoothing the ruching once more. That will have to do. He shifted his weight experimentally. That's when he felt it. The back. Because the fabric was ruched vertically, it drew inward between the curves of his backside, especially over the thong. The gathering lifted the hem slightly, emphasizing everything it touched. He shifted. The sensation followed. Not uncomfortable, just present. He stared at his reflection. The hemline was shorter than he'd expected. Significantly, he had miscalculated. "If I bend," he muttered, This becomes a public service announcement. The dress didn't flare. That was the upside. The skirt portion was tight pencil-like at the bottom. It wouldn't flutter upward the way the pleated ones would. But it was short, very short. He adjusted it downward instinctively. It barely moved. The ruching pulled it back into place immediately. A slow breath left him. The effect in the mirror was undeniably club-ready. Sultry, calculated, and not remotely innocent. The black lace at the bust and back made it look like lingerie cleverly disguised as a dress. The tiny bow between the cups emphasized the bra-like illusion. The snug compression of the bodkin fabric sculpted his waist and hips in a way that felt ludicrously convincing. And the push-up padding. He stared at the reflection again. "That's excessive," he said flatly. The silhouette was dramatic and frustratingly cohesive. The straps cut clean lines. The ruching made his hips look fuller, his waist narrower. He looked like someone who had absolutely planned this outfit. He could feel the lace waistband underneath the dress, a constant reminder of just how thin the layers were. He straightened quickly. "Careful," he muttered to himself. He took one cautious step. The dress moved with him, snug, controlled, no swaying. Okay, that was the point. He had chosen practicality. He just hadn't anticipated how aggressively fitted practicality would be. He smoothed the fabric once more and headed for the door. Emily looked up when he stepped back into the living room. Emily stopped short. Then her eyes widened slightly. "Oh," she said. She wasn't laughing or teasing, just stunned. He folded his arms immediately. "Don't." She pressed her lips together, trying and failing not to smile. "That," she said carefully, "was from my I just turned 19 and discovered clubs exist phase. I gathered. I wore that out exactly 4 times before realizing I hated sticky dance floors." Understandable. She circled him slowly, not teasing this time, but evaluating, like a designer checking a finished garment on a model who hadn't expected to be one. She stopped in front of him again, gaze drifting upward. "You kept the bun," she said lightly. He stared at her. "What?" She lifted a finger, pointing vaguely toward the back of his head. "The scrunchie." He reached back automatically. His fingers met the plush white fabric gathered there, still snug, still holding. A brief pause. "I forgot," he said. She studied him for half a second longer. "Huh." He dropped his hand. "It was practical," he added, almost defensively, "and I didn't feel like fixing it again." Her mouth curved slightly, but she didn't push it. He resisted the urge to tug the hem of the dress down again. "It's very bold," she said. "It's aggressively short." She tilted her head. "It's not that short." He gave her a look. She grinned. "Okay, it's short." Her gaze dipped briefly, assessing the fit along his hips, and she let out a soft laugh. "The ruching really works on you." "I can feel that," he replied dryly. She stepped closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "If the power comes back on later, we could totally find a club. Show off your sexy little. Finish that sentence and I'm locking you outside in the snow." She burst out laughing. "I was going to say confidence." "Liar." She leaned in slightly. "It does hug your butt, though." He sighed. "Yes, I'm aware." She grinned wider. "Don't tempt me." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I'm tempting you now." "Absolutely." "That sounds like a you problem." She stared at him. A slow smile spread across her face. He was adapting. And for the first time since this whole thing started, he wasn't just surviving it. He was playing along. She studied him a little longer. The dress, the bare shoulders, the way he stood stiff but trying not to look stiff. Then something shifted in her expression. "Okay," she said suddenly. He narrowed his eyes. "That tone is never good." "I'm bored." "You have a closet full of canvases." "I've been painting all week. And I need something new." He crossed his arms. "Define new." Her smile turned innocent, too innocent. "I've always wanted a sister." He stared at her. "I don't know what you're getting at, but the answer is no." She ignored that. Someone to do makeovers with, someone to experiment on, someone to braid hair and complain about boys with. "I am not." "But I never had one." She stepped closer, tilting her head. You, however, are currently wearing an extremely short party dress." He opened his mouth, closed it, and she continued smoothly. "You've got the whole look going already. The panties. The bare legs, the whole," she gestured vaguely at him. "Very soft situation." He glanced down at himself. Emily stepped closer again, lowering her voice. "You already read very feminine right now," she said, designer language slipping in without her realizing it. "There isn't much manly about your appearance at the moment." "I don't want to look like a girl." She gave him a slow once-over. "You picked a dress with push-up padding." "That is not my fault. The other options weren't any better." "And lace." He breathed out sharply. "And," she added sweetly, "a little makeup and painted nails aren't going to suddenly erase your manhood." He stared at her. She smiled, bright, unapologetic. "Which," she added quickly, "isn't a bad thing. You look good. Just, you could look even better." He dragged a hand down his face. "This is already humiliating." "It doesn't have to be," she countered. "It can just be fun." "Fun for who?" "For me," she admitted immediately. "At least you're honest." She softened slightly then. "Nobody will ever know. Power's out, snowed in, it's just us." He hesitated. She leaned in a little closer. "And I've always wanted to do this with someone." That landed differently. He shifted his weight. "This is temporary," he warned. "Of course." "No pictures." She hesitated half a second too long. "Emily." "Fine, no pictures." He squinted at her. She rolled her eyes. "I swear." He let out a breath through his nose. "You're relentless." She smiled. He considered refusing again. He really should refuse again. She stepped closer, close enough now that he could feel her warmth, and her voice dipped slightly. "Besides." He swallowed. She winked. "I'll make it worth your while." Silence, his brain stalled. Her grin turned just a little mischievous. "Relax," she added lightly. "I'm not evil." Debatable, he tried to keep his expression neutral. Failed. "Makeup, nails, and hair," he muttered finally. Her smile grew slow and triumphant. "But this is temporary." "Of course," she said again, far too pleased. And that was how he found himself following her towards the stairs, up to the bathroom again, with push-up lace, ruched tension, and reluctant curiosity moving with him in synchronized steps.